But we have people like Andy to help us out when we get there. So I'm going to do the formal welcome now because we have an awesome event. So hi, everyone. I'm Don Saucier. I'm the Faculty Associate Director of the Teaching Learning Center here at K-State. And you are here for our professional development series. I'm so glad you can make time for us. Wednesdays at noon all year. We're here over Zoom, and we're glad that you're here with us too. Next week, I always talk about next week before this week. Next week, we have a wonderful presentation by Andy Faber called Backward and Ungraded, Promoting Equity Through Assessment. And that's going to be excellent. We're going to get to hear Dr. Faber talk about some awesome ways to rethink some of the traditional assessment methods we use in our class, make it better for our students and better for us. And I love when it's kind of a win-win, better for students and better for us. So come see Dr. Faber's talk next week. But that's not why you came today. Today, you came to a need-to-know event. Some of our events are need to know because we think everyone should be there. Everyone should listen. This is just foundational for not even just excellent teaching, but for teaching. And we have Andy Thompson here from the Office of Student Life. He'll be presenting on how we follow through on the promise of support. And if you've met Andy, and I've had that opportunity on a number of occasions, and I'm so happy to have met Andy, you're going to see that some people are matched well to the positions they're in. Andy is a wonderful match to position, and I'm so excited that he's here to share with us how we can help our students through troubled times. Andy, the floor is yours, and I'm so excited you're here.
Awesome. Thank you, Don. When you all invited me to this, you're like, your historic involvement in our program. And I was like, wow, I've never felt so seasoned in my life here at K-State, but I appreciate you having me back. If you've been to this, it's not much different of a presentation, just maybe some updated numbers, updated resources, and maybe just a good refresher for folks. I've got a PowerPoint that I'll share here, and so I'll try to keep track in the chat or anything there. But if you've got questions, just absolutely pop in. I'm more than open to have ongoing discussion as we do this presentation. I also recognize that the Zoom land is just a creative space that we have to figure that out sometimes. So I'm going to share my screen here. Hopefully we get that. I'll start with the share, and then I'll actually pull open. I think it's going to look a little weird here for a second. So let me do this, because then I'm going to, in theory, my PowerPoint's going to pop up on this. There we go. Can you all see the PowerPoint? Is that up there quite yet? We're good to go? All right, I'm getting the thumbs up. Excellent. And then I think I can get the chat going over here. Perfect. Well, I appreciate everyone coming and taking time to view this and have this discussion. I think I want to start by saying a lot of this presentation is just around the philosophies in the Office of Student Life and how we tackle students. We're going to talk about resources, and I just want to put out there a lot of the work we do leans into the resources that are on this campus. And we simply are kind of a conduit to get students to those resources and try to be knowledgeable of all the resources that students have available to them. And then we're just kind of the middle person to get students to the right places. And so I'll start by just saying thank you to those of you on the call that are part of the resources that I'm going to just talk about later in the presentation. Also, thank you for coming to just show that care and support that you all have for our students. My mouse going in the right spot here. There we go. So on the screen in front of you here that's just our official mission in the Office of Student Life. The way I define the work that we do within our office is that we're just here to help students out. We're here to help the K-State community out. We know that in a student's time at K-State, whether that's a semester or 6 or 8 years, it's likely there will be something that goes on in their life that is not perfect, because life is not perfect. We don't care how big or how little the issue is. We don't care how many issues there are. We want to help. So we want to help reduce the harm or the impact that a student is facing. If a student doesn't know where to begin, we want to be their starting point. If a student feels like they've been everywhere else, we want to be their ending point, so we can kind of help resolve to the best that we can and reduce anything that they're facing. Some quick facts about our office, just to share. We typically ballpark are about 3,500 students a year that we engage with. You can see here that COVID has spiked us a little bit. Part of that is also there was an excused absence policy that went into place there for a while that kind of spiked our numbers during our COVID era. I've also shared on here our student of concern reports. I have a slide that goes more in depth on student of concern, but the way to think about that as we think about student of concern is that somebody else puts that student on our radar. So that can be as simple as this student showed up to class every single day for 4 weeks, and now for the last 2 weeks, they haven't shown up and they haven't responded to my email. Like, that's an appropriate student of concern referral, right? Because you're not getting outreach. We may then be able to say, yep, we know exactly what's going on for that student. Here's what's happening, or to try to start track that student down. That could be a student sits down in your office and says, I just found out my mom has terminal cancer. I'm not sure I can still be a student here, right? That's a student of concern referral so that we can talk to that student in a broader context of A, how are they supporting themselves? But then what's that going to mean down the road as things go forward with mom's health? It just may be a student that sits in your office and is just overwhelmed and says, I suffer from anxiety and depression. I can't get out of bed. I don't know what to do, right? You can send that to us, and we're going to proactively outreach to that student. I share the graph on here just because I think it's an interesting narrative of kind of our student of concern process and what we've experienced in that outreach. I don't look at this graph and go, oh my gosh, we have a major problem. Why are there so many students being referred? I look at this graph and go, I think we've done a better job as a campus community of recognizing our students in need and understanding that there are helper offices that want to proactively help our students, and that our campus community is just doing an excellent job of getting students to us. Okay. I think in 2013, there were probably 900 students that could have used our services? Absolutely. Absolutely. And so I just think we've done a better job as a campus community of taking things seriously and passing things up. So who's doing this work in the office? So I'm associate dean and director in the office. I've been in office of student life for 9 years now. This is my 3rd year as director. You will see several interims on our screen. We've had some shuffling around here with Justin Frederick taking over in the Office of Institutional Equity and doing a great job over there. But Dean Laurel Moody, Janelle Rieger was a coordinator for us and has graciously agreed to be an interim assistant dean this year while we're filling in. Wade Weber, and then Amy Hall might be a name that's familiar to you all. During our COVID times, Amy slid in and helped us out with our COVID absence processes. So anyone on that screen, you're welcome to talk to. If you call the office, just talk to whoever answers the phone. Our student staff's well trained. You don't just have to talk to me or Laurel. You can share that message and we can start diving into files. And so I can call you back with a little bit more knowledge of the situation. New this year to the Office of Student Life and a joint partnership with Housing and Dining, we have been lucky enough with SGA's support to get some funding for 2 case managers. Kayleigh Smith and Mary Rodriguez have joined us this year. Kind of an OSL on the road approach. So Kayleigh is actually officing out in the Derby Dining Complex, and Mary is over in the Kramer Dining Complex within Housing and Dining. They are specifically focused on students that live within those residential communities who may need a little more high touch, high support. And so if there's a student that just, we need to check in with a lot of different resources and make sure that we're checking all of our boxes, Kayleigh and Mary are there to meet with those students on a weekly basis to kind of guide them, skill build them. And if it takes 8 weeks, it takes 8 weeks. If it takes a semester, it takes a semester, but they're in that living community so that they have easier, quicker access for those students to be able to pop in. And so we're really excited about that. We have funding for 3 years for those positions. I think we will not be short student need there. So we will hopefully be expanding that program is my hope down the road. Something else to just know, Sarah Barr is the student's attorney. So part of every student's fees pays for Sarah Barr services. So if you ever have a student that comes to you because they got a minor in possession of alcohol ticket, they're having landlord tenant issues, lower level legal pieces, they can come meet with Sarah free of charge. And she can talk through that legal process. If she can't handle it, then she will make a referral to an attorney here locally in the community to help our students be supported in that situation. Sarah and I literally share a wall here in the office. And so There's a lot of referrals back and forth. So a student that might be going through our processes and shares things, we say, hey, you could talk to an attorney, or vice versa. Sarah's able to say, hey, I actually think you're dealing with a lot more stuff. You should talk with one of the deans in the offices to get support. So some things I want you to keep in mind during our discussion today. Life happens usually at the worst times. We unfortunately don't get notified when we're going to have a crisis. And so as we're working with students, we're hoping that folks just recognize that the planet we inhabit together and the things that occur for one another, and we don't get to plan for it. Meet the student where they are. I share this with, not every single student is in a class with the plan to I got to get the 100% A, right? Sometimes students are in a class because they're like, I know I just got to get this done, and this subject kicks my butt. Or I'm working 30 hours a week and I'm taking 16 hours just to try to get graduated because I've got to get out of this place. And so our students are very stretched thin. And I'm just asking that as you're working with students, that you're understanding everything that's on their plate. Grace and understanding go a long way with each other. I often find myself having conversations with folks to say, if you were dealing with this situation, how would you want others to support you? So if you as a professor, as an instructor, had someone close to you pass away, and you needed to go for a week to be in that moment, to go through that grieving process, what do you hope your department head or your dean does to help support you in that moment? And that's what I hope you can apply as you're working with your students. Students are in more than just your class or just one class. So I will tell students all the time, when you get behind in a class or a series of classes, if you're in 12 hours and you're 2 weeks behind, until you get caught up, you're in 24 hours. You are trying to get caught up in that. And so as professors, I ask that folks try to keep that in mind as well. So as a professor, you may say, hey, y'all give you a week extension. Can you knock this out? Well, if that's the only class the student's in, that may be manageable, right? And for another 2 classes, that might be manageable. But now if we got 3, 4, 5 classes, now all of a sudden that is just a lot for a student to take on who's coming out of an absence or out of a tricky situation anyway. And I don't know that we're always allowing our students the space to fully get caught back up when we talk about the totality of the circumstances they're facing. So just keep that in mind. Think outside the box. And if you don't know how to think outside the box, or you're like, I'm not sure what to do, call me, because I don't teach classes. And so sometimes I'll just say things. I'm like, could you do this? No, yeah, I hadn't thought of that. I am more than happy to throw some random ideas out there and see if they stick. Talk to each other, talk to department heads, talk to other faculty members, see what has been done before. Is there an alternative assignment that a student could do, right? I recognize you all have lots of students that you're working with, so some of that's hard to do in a really manageable way, but just something to kind of think about. Pay attention to your students. And I've got a whole slide here in a little bit to talk some more about that. And then something that I think I stole this and put on this PowerPoint from Carolyn Jones, who used to be the coordinator in our office. I think Carolyn was married to Tucker, who used to be the grad in the TLC, which is probably the reason why I got connected into this program. Not all crises are loud, right? The loud ones are easy to see, right? While that's an emergency, that's a crisis. A lot of crises are happening for our students below the surface, and it's just noticing they're just not as engaged as they used to be. And so I think that paying attention and understanding your students and building on that relationship, I think, is how we identify these things that are kind of below the surface. I'm going to play a quick video, and I'm guessing that most of you have seen it, and I think I shared my sound. So I'm going to play this, and Don, I can see you on my screen. So if the sound is not coming through, give me a thumbs down or something so I can re-engage here.
So what is empathy, and why is it very different than sympathy? Empathy fuels connection. Sympathy drives disconnection. Empathy, it's very interesting. Teresa Wiseman is a nursing scholar who studied professions, very diverse professions where empathy is relevant, and came up with 4 qualities of empathy. Perspective taking, the ability to take the perspective of another person or recognize their perspective as their truth. Staying out of judgment, not easy when you enjoy it as much as most of us do. Recognizing emotion in other people and then communicating that. Empathy is feeling with people. And to me, I always think of empathy as this kind of sacred space when someone's kind of in a deep hole and they shout out from the bottom and they say, I'm stuck, it's dark, I'm overwhelmed. And then we look and we say, hey, you climb down. I know what it's like down here. And you're not alone. Sympathy is, ooh, it's bad, no. You want a sandwich? Empathy is a choice, and it's a vulnerable choice, because in order to connect with you, I have to connect with something in myself that knows that feeling. Rarely, if ever, does an empathic response begin with at least. Yeah. And we do it all the time. Because you know what? Someone just shared something with us that's incredibly painful, and we're trying to silver lining it. I don't think that's a verb, but I'm using it as one. We're trying to put the silver lining around it. So, I had a miscarriage. Oh, at least you know you can get pregnant. I think my marriage is falling apart. At least you have a marriage. John's getting kicked out of school. At least Sarah is an A student. But one of the things we do sometimes in the face of very difficult conversations is we try to make things better. If I share something with you that's very difficult, I'd rather you say, I don't even know what to say right now, I'm just so glad you told me. Because the truth is, rarely can a response make something better. What makes something better is connection.
So I share that video, I think just to kind of lay some groundwork, and I think it's an approach that we try to take here. I am part of the role that OSL plays is if we have a student pass away, and we get notified by police, the police are the first ones to call that student's family and notify them of that student's passing. We try to be the second phone call in. And something that I've gotten to is I start those phone calls with saying, I don't have anything to say to you that's going to help this feel better, but what I'm here to do is to help to make whatever K-State can do easier for you, so you don't have to have us as one of your worry lists on your to-do list. And I think families have reported back that they appreciate that, because they know I don't have an answer to make it better. I can't bring their student back. I can't make that situation better in that sense. But if I can make it easier for them on to take care of their student account, or to help them, notify faculty, or to do all that, that's what I want to do. Right. And so that's an extreme example of not having the answer. And I think what Brene says there about rarely does a response make it better, but can we just listen? Thank you for telling me. How do I connect you? How do I help take the burden from you to move processes forward? I think that's the important thing that we tried to do. So how do we recognize a student in crisis? And I think you all probably can think of examples of students that you've worked with that you're like, yep, I get that. Yep, that didn't feel quite right. I've got this list on the screen. I'm not going to walk through every one of these. What I would ask you to keep in mind is you're working with a student that is in your student group, an advisee, in a class of 200. If you engage with a student, whether that's verbally or just in the same room or through a graded paper, in that engagement, if that person were your partner, spouse, sibling, best friend, if you would engage your partner, spouse, sibling, best friend in a meaningful, like, are you okay conversation, that's when you should be engaging that student as well, right? That's when you should be filling out that SOC to say, well, I didn't talk to them, but I think somebody should, and here's what I can relay is going on. And so if you ever are just like, my gut is telling me something's going on for this student, reach out, right? Like I rarely have had a student come in my office and go, I don't know what the hell that professor is thinking. I'm fine. I wish they would leave me alone. Like that just doesn't happen, right? Students come to our office and they're like, yeah, there is something going on. And if you're worried about a student's response, you can tell us that in our referral form. And then we're gonna share, like, you've came to a university that tries to care for you. Are we a perfect institution? I think we all would say no to that. Do we try really hard to be supportive and caring for one another? I do think we try to do that. Sometimes we miss, but I do think we try to do that. So if you've got a student in your class and, you know, if you're in a class of 20, like my hope is that you have some sort of relationship with students so you can engage a little differently. If you've got a class of 200, like that's really hard to do on a personal level. So how do you do that, right? Well, they were coming to class every week. They were performing at a high level. Their quality of work was good. They sat in the front row, or they were put together. And now all of a sudden they're showing up and they're not showered. They're not shaving, not so much like the, hey, I have freedom in college, I've grown a beard, not shaving, but they're just not taking care of themselves, or their assignments start to tail off. They're not responsive to your outreach. Like those are the little signs that I think can mean there might be something larger going on for a student. And so as you're noticing that, like that's when you email them and do that quick check-in. That's when you let us know so we can engage the problem when it's this large before it's kind of death by 1,000 paper cuts, or yeah, it's exhibiting that they didn't come to class for a week. Well, then you reach out and they say, well, yeah, because this major thing has happened in my life and I need to focus on that, right? So often that just one email outreach, that one somebody does care, is all it takes to really get us going in a really positive direction in terms of supporting our students. So building on that, you know, I think, how do you build on your established relationship? You know, what kind of environment have you created within, whether it's your classroom space, your office space, the student organization space, that lets a student know that, hey, I care, right? Like I can't fix all your problems, but I'm somebody you could come to who wants to hear it, to get it to someone who can help you and address these problems and find solutions for you, whatever solutions may be. Relating observations, right? Like we've touched on that. Normalizing help, right? I think I spend a lot of times with students who are like, I was raised in the family that said, you don't ask for help. You just figure it out. Now, I think, again, with the student of concern number growth, we're seeing that folks are more normalized to getting that help. And I think that's 100% a positive. Now, are we staffed appropriately in our mental health field in this country? We know we're not. Hopefully that's a trend that will change, but I think it's really important. And I think I'm probably just preaching to a group of folks that know this, because I don't think you'd come to this session if this wasn't already important to you. But that it's okay to get help, right? Like it's important to get help. I say, if I break my leg, I'm not just going to wrap it up and deal with it, right? I'm going to go to the doctor because I don't know how to fix my broken leg. I don't know how to fix my car that breaks down on the side of the road. I got to call AAA, right? Like there are helping things we do, but we got to normalize, like, how are we helping ourselves in kind of those emotional moments when things are overwhelming. For you, it's making the appropriate referrals, right? So maybe you've got a really good support mechanism within your academic dean's office. That's us. Right? Are you referring students to counseling and psychological services, to the family center, to my SSP, which we're going to touch on more in depth here in a little bit, because my SSP is a new program that just launched within the last couple of weeks. Does a student live in housing and dining? Right? Like housing and dining has a robust support network for students within housing. So if a student says, I'm just not connected, oh, you're a freshman? Do you live in the halls? Have you talked to your RA? Have you talked to your community coordinator? Now we've got Mary and Kayleigh available. So there are resources that you can just kind of help proactively guide them to, that maybe they can take care of some of that themselves. And are you taking care of yourself? It's hard to care for others. It's hard work, but are you properly taking care of yourself? If you deal with a student situation that really gets to you, maybe it triggers you in some way, or it's a heavy burden on you because you've got things going on in your own life, How are you taking care of yourself in the job and outside of the job, whether that's with university resources or leaning into your family and friends and coworkers? It's really important that you check in with yourself as you're supporting students. So if you've got a student, we've talked on student of concern. I don't care how I get it. We just want it. So you can call us. The report it form is on our website. If you're not familiar with the website, ksu.edu/report. If you've got any sort of report, you're like, I don't know how to get this to the right people. /report will take you for a code of conduct, a threat concern, a Title IX concern, student of concern, honor integrity violation. I think there's 11 reports on that website. So just remember /report, and that will get you to probably the right place. When we get a student of concern, we ask you on that form to kind of define, is this low, medium, or high? On all low and medium SOCs, both our coordinators and the dean that's on call for the week gets every one of those. And we're going to put eyeballs on it. If you mark high, and high is you've got kind of a health and safety concern piece, right? Like it's elevated nature. Every person that works in the Office of Student Life gets that report. So somebody's putting eyeballs on it. The dean on call gets a text about the report, so we can try to put eyeballs. If you think it's an immediate student is actively suicidal, going to harm themselves or others, you need to call the police and then submit that report. So please know that, like, we don't replace the police in a health and safety piece. If we get a low or immediate, we're going to take a look at that. We're going to email the student, maybe give it a couple days. We'll email again, we'll text, we'll do things of that nature. If it's high, health, safety, wellness check, we're going to look at that, and we may call the student immediately. We may text, we may send a housing staff member over to check in on that student. It may be a situation where we're connecting with the police to say, hey, can you help us track this student down? We may call a parent and say, have you talked to your student? Because with health and safety FERPA exception, we can do that. We are always going to lean on making sure that student is safe over like hiding behind any sort of like, oh, can't do that. We're going to lean into, because lots of times I'll call a parent and they'll be like, no, I've been texting with them all day. I'll be like, can you tell them to call me? And they're like, yeah, absolutely. We make that decision. If you ever just are like, I'm not sure what to do, I need some advice, we do have the student of concern guide on our website where you can hop on, and we try to give helpful tips and tricks in offices. I just saw in the chat about the SSP. We're going to go more in depth on that. But if you just want some tips and tricks, check out the guide first. And see if that's helpful. If not, fill out the form. Give one of us a call. Like, we're going to talk you through what we think's best. That's just an example of the form. For those of you that have filled it out, I don't think it takes much more than a minute to complete it. If you have attachments, you can attach things to the form. It's really quick and simple. That's just an example of the guide. It probably needs some graphic updates. Some other pieces just to kind of touch on, we are the office that does the excused absence policy. Actually a pretty limited list of things that fall under the excused absence policy. We're going to work with Don, I owe you an email, on some excused absences and adding to that, because I think there's some pieces that need added for our students in terms of hospitalizations and things of this nature. A large piece that you may get from us is called a verified absence. Okay. So if you're ever working with a student and you're like, I just need to check this out. We do not want to verify every dentist appointment, right? Like that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about those things that a student's like, I've been gone a week, or I'm going to be gone a week, or my mental health just got really poor and I kind of fell off. Those are the things you want them to send to us, because we want to be able to support that student more fully. And then you may get an email from us that says, hey, this student was gone for a week. We can verify that absence. Sometimes that's through documentation. Sometimes that's just through conversation, because we know life doesn't always come with a note. And so you can let us kind of hammer through that situation. And you may get an email from us that's asking you to work with a student. If you ever get an email from us where it's like, hey, this student kind of fell off for 2 weeks, but they're getting connected to resources. We want you to know they're connected with us, and we're asking you to have a conversation and work with them. We're asking you to have a conversation with them. So if you're in a class, I think the first time I presented this, Don was asking good questions about this. If we ever send you an email and you're like, Andy, we can't do that. Like, we've told students, right? There's only so much we can do. If you're in a human body lab and they have the cadaver and they're working on one part of that body for that 2 weeks you're gone, they can't pull out another cadaver, right? So there just may not be things that we can do in the moment. Maybe it's an incomplete and we come back to it. Maybe it's an alternative assignment. Maybe you say to the student, I just can't do this because I physically can't do this. Know that in student life, we've already had that conversation as a possibility with the student. We're just wanting them to gather that information so then they can come back to us and we can make good decisions for them moving forward, right? But maybe you haven't talked to the student at all, and that this is the first time you've heard that something's going on for them. And then you can be a support to them as they're just gathering all the rest of that information and figuring out what their stack is that they've got to work through. Okay.
Andy, can I chime in real quick?
Go for it.
One of the things that I'm told often by GTAs and by faculty is that they didn't know they could reach out to the Office of Student Life for guidance. You
Okay.
absolutely can. They are amazing people. They will help you if there's something. So if you hear from them, same thing with the Student Access Center, right? If they reach out to you with an accommodation request information and you have questions, reach out and they will be able to give you further guidance and discuss mutually convenient solutions. So it's amazing that I tell people this all the time and they're surprised. So I just felt it bared repeating.
Yeah.
Thank you, Andy.
Thank you for that. I'm just looking over at my chat here. So Beth, on the student of concern form, you can check. Yes, you can tell the student. No, please do not tell the student, or only if you have to. We don't ever take the actual form you submit and like give it to the student. So we kind of have it. We know it in the back of our head. And if you say absolutely not, or only if have to, we do it in a really intentional way, right? And it always comes from that place of care and concern piece. Now, if you're the only one on the planet that knows the information, obviously a student might piece two and two together. And I also think, like, if you're working with a student and you're to the level where you're like, I just think student life should be involved, I think it's helpful to say to a student, like, I appreciate you sharing this with me. There are other offices that I think are suited for this, or this is what they do every day. And I would love to connect you with them. And I think students really appreciate that. The progress reports. Yeah. So the SSC Navigate piece, right, that you all have been asked to fill out recently, those don't come to us anymore. We used to get a chunk of the alerts. It just became too much of kind of an administrative burden for us. And so our partners that are doing that have been unbelievable in terms of they kind of take that and shuffle it. And advisors are getting a lot of those alerts. And then advisors, if you end up with like 3 or 4, and this happens every year, then those advisors basically package those together and shoot them to us as an SOC to kind of elevate that up. But I think that SSC Navigate piece is more of kind of those lower levels. So if you do both, that's not a problem. Like, you can copy and paste it and throw it in a second form. But a lot of those aren't going to touch our plate until an advisor kind of goes, wait a second, we got 2 or 3 of these and they're elevated, then they're going to pass that up to us in the kind of the ideal flow. And I think so far we've had from our angle good success with that in terms of what we're getting passed up to us. Does that make sense for Beth and Myrta? Okay. So a couple other things just to know. So, like, we've obviously been touching on our primary roles, that student of concern. How do we help students that are just dealing with tricky situations? We also do a lot of the policies, right? And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the policies, but I do think it's important to understand our office oversees the code of conduct. So if you ever have a student that's having behavioral issues and you think it's a code of conduct, absolutely call me. Laurel and I co-advise that, and would be happy to talk you through what the code of conduct looks like, how that's all going to play out if you chose to file a code of conduct. I also chair our university's threat management policy. If anybody's bored tomorrow from 9 to 11, Ryan Van Dusen and I are hosting a threat management policy training. So you can sign up through HRIS. There's a little plug. It'll be also on Zoom. So if you ever have a student that you feel like is exhibiting threatening or seriously disruptive behavior, or you have a student sit down and say to you that they're a victim of seriously disruptive behavior or threats, that 100% needs to be an email, phone call to me. On that /report website, there's also a threat report. Ryan Van Dusen oversees non-student issues. I have student issues. We work closely together on that. And so know that there is a resource, and it's me if you have those concerns. 3010 is our Title IX non-discrimination policy through OIE. Some other pieces like just within the office. The social media policy is new last year. So if you ever have a student that's exhibiting kind of concerning behavior on social media, it's a tricky line, right? Because we have free speech. Our social media policy was written to allow the university to have discussions with students. If a student's social media behavior is crossing policy lines, so are threatening, discrimination, any of that, our policies can go grab that. If a student is just exhibiting behavior that's kind of disruptive to the community because people are unhappy with the language, but it's protected, I can go out and ask that student to have a meeting with me just to have an educational conversation about the impact of social media behavior. Again, that can just be, you just shoot an email to me and let me know what's going on there. Okay. I imagine with election season coming up that our social media policy will probably get a little more active than it's been here the last little bit. If you need to make a report, there's that website I was talking about. When we're talking about Title IX discrimination, harassment, stalking, those sort of issues, if a student discloses to you that something has occurred, you are mandated to report that to OIE. Okay. You can get it to us, but I just get it over to OIE. So if a student comes to you and sits down and says, I've experienced some behavior that might fall in these policies, you absolutely should pause and interrupt and say, I want to support you. Here's how I'm going to support you. The care office is confidential. They specialize in this. I recommend you go talk with them because they're going to talk about resources, policies, how to navigate all of these things, and keep the ball in your court in terms of locus of control about next steps. As soon as it's given over to one of us on this call, that student loses kind of that locus of control to an extent, right? We've got to make a report to OIE at that point. I do want to share really quickly a new process that OIE and OSL are doing. We've been doing it for about a year now. If a student comes in and makes a report to OIE or gets to OIE, and it has to do with something that could also be a threat management policy. So we're going to talk about sexual violence. If a student comes in and says they experience sexual violence, OIE gives that report to me as well. And the reason we do that, the OIE policy only goes on campus or university sponsored programs. Our threat management policy does allow us to go off campus in certain circumstances. It's our one policy that allows that. Okay. And so we get this report, and I'm talking for student issues because that's what I oversee. OIE is going to reach out to that student for resources and information gathering. I'm going to reach out to that student for information gathering. Justin indicates that the student may hear from me. I indicate that the student may hear from Justin, and then we want to have that meeting jointly. We do that for two reasons. One, so that student only has to share their narrative that one time with us as we review through policy. And two, to make sure that student has all the resources available to them that our offices can provide. The student still stays in the driver's seat in terms of a Title IX investigation. If a threat is determined, then I kind of got to go with that, right? Because we have a threat to campus and we've got to address that one way, shape, or form. So know that if you have a student, because I know there's kind of been a trust issue with that process. I think over the last year with Stephanie Lott's leadership, they've done a really nice job of getting OIE to a spot where folks should be able to trust that office, and Justin's just continuing that forward. So that's a little more information on that piece. So I got a few slides left here. So some resources, CAPS, Counseling and Psychological Services. Students get 8 free sessions a semester, okay? Now I think what's really important to know is they've got a coordinated care model. So between 8:30 and 3:30, a student can show up to CAPS and say, I would like to see somebody to just discuss my options. They're going to see a person then. Now there may be a little bit of a wait because if there's other students that showed up right in the moment, but they're going to meet with somebody in that moment for 10, 15 minutes. That therapist is going to hear what's going on for them and make a couple determinations, right? Yep. Continuing here at CAPS makes sense in your therapy session. Actually, I think you'll be better suited at somewhere off campus. Maybe group therapy or maybe some workshops make sense. But that student's going to get those options laid out for them in terms of what that next step looks like. We've had a lot of success. By we, I mean Cody Walls and her folks have had a lot of success. We did not hit a wait list last year at CAPS, which is the first time since I've been in student life that was achieved. So basement of Lafine, students can just kind of walk in and have that. My SSP, so we've seen that kind of promoted. My SSP is a brand new app, and it's an app on us that you can download on your phone, 24/7, 365, available for Manhattan students, Olathe students, Polytech students, global students, okay? A student can hop on there. There are resources that they can use, but they also can chat with a therapist. They can call a therapist. There are therapists that have multiple languages for a student to speak with. The notes in my SSP are accessible by our counselors in CAPS. So if a student calls at 2 a.m. in crisis and talks to a therapist and those notes go in and the therapist says, you know what, you should follow up with CAPS tomorrow, CAPS is going to be able to see that interaction and what occurred within that piece. Okay. I've sent several students to it so far, and it's all been after hours, right? Our after hours support has not been as great as we'd like it to be. My SSP allows that to now be in place for students. And also, I think that key component is the global students, right? We weren't ever able to offer therapy for our global students because CAPS is in Kansas. And if you're in California, you can't talk to a counselor in Kansas. My SSP is able to connect those students. It is also available for our students who are studying abroad. So if you got a student on an abroad trip who has a concern, they can hop on my SSP and talk to a therapist while they're abroad. Okay. I hope that answers the question. Myrta, if you need more, just throw it in the chat and we'll elaborate at the end here a little bit further. Yeah, Beth, that's a great question. My understanding is there's supposed to be a little bit more intentional information, like campaign sharing here. I think the program got rolled out just a little bit earlier than we were planning, which is good, right? That's good. So it's kind of a soft launch right now, but my understanding is there'll be a little bit more intentional, like, hey, here we are, get it more out in front. You are more than welcome to start sharing it with your students. Absolutely start sharing that. I haven't been on CAPS website yet to see what the web presence is there, but they're going to be our primary hub of kind of my SSP information that you can just point to there. Again, I haven't hopped on their website to see what that looks like. So Lafine Health Center, obviously we know what Lafine has been capable of through our unfortunate COVID experience, but they did a really great job. But if you've got students that need any sort of medical attention, physical therapy, know that Lafine is available there. The Morrison Family Center for Wellbeing, lots of proactive programs for well-being. We are in the process in year 2 or 3 of the JED initiative, which is an initiative of probably like 50 of us as campus partners that goes across student life, academic units, all across the board, that's looking at our well-being programs and how we're proactively helping our students. And I think several of you on this call are actually part of that JED initiative there. So I look for really good things to come out of the Morrison Family Center here as they get staffed up and as we wrap up our JED kind of review of different things. Thank you, Colleen, for sharing that in the chat. Family Center, so another mental health support resource through our awesome College of Health and Human Sciences. Primary different, there's a few differences. One of these, Family Center does have a small cost for students, very low. Like should not be a cost that stops our students from going in most cases. I think the nice thing with the Family Center is this can also, like if a student starts with us and then needs to stop, they can continue that therapy in a non-student capacity. I also talk to students about like, if it's just physically hard for you to get places, some of them do Zoom, but also like if you live in Derby, maybe the Derby Center, maybe Family Center makes more sense. If you live in Kramer, maybe CAPS makes more sense. So just whatever fits for our student. Some other resources, Cat's Cupboard, been around for a few years. Unfortunately, we do know students still struggle with food insecurities. And so this is a no questions asked. Student can go and swipe their card just for numbers tracking, not for people tracking, and get food. They can go every day if they want to. So if you have a student that's food insecure, that's currently in the basement of Fairchild Hall, hopefully expanding and moving soon. PowerCat Financial Counseling. I just met with a student yesterday that as we went around for about an hour trying to figure it out, what it came down to was they didn't know how to budget. And so they were just kind of taking their money and dumping it over here. And I said, that's not where that should go. And no, if I don't know what to do with it, PowerCat Financial, right? Free of charge, go over, learn kind of those money skills that we know are so hard to figure out. Academic Achievement Center here in Holton Hall, tutoring, academic coaches, again, our primary Navigate office here coming out Academic Achievement Center, amazing work done. If you have a student that's just like, I don't know how to time manage, get them up with an academic coach, right? Like let's build the skill so that it doesn't proceed for 4, 5, 6 semesters. Student Access Center, of course, if students with permanent or temporary disability needs, that's in everybody's syllabus. I think that office gets their message out really well. But if you ever have a student that mentions to you, yeah, in high school I was on IEP, or I got extra time testing, or a student breaks their right hand and that's their dominant hand and now they need a note taker, right? We want to get them connected there. The care office we've touched on, but I do want to highlight the therapy fund that the care office has. So if there is a student who requires additional therapy for what has occurred for them, there is money available to them. We've had to make an adjustment to the therapy fund in terms of how we're distributing that so we can reach more students more broadly on that. Morris Family Multicultural Student Center, again, Safe Zone Project Impact, amazing space for students to connect with one another, kitchen they can rent, room space. So if you haven't been through that center, it's connected to the union. It's absolutely worth going over to. LGBT Resource Centers here in Holton Hall. Again, Dr. Brandon Haddock's done an amazing job in partnership with our students to develop that center into just an amazing space. If you ever need somewhere to just walk in and just be like, this is like a happy space and it's comfortable, and that it's amazing. And then not to downplay the rest, but just for time, obviously our rec center, the union has amazing programs, military affiliated resource center in the union. So if you have students that are connected in the military, not just our veterans, but were raised in a veteran family, a military family, that center is there for them. And our Center for Student Involvement and all the great student organizations that we've got on campus for students. So this is just a reminder of what I hope that we kind of keep in mind as we move forward with one another. I wrap this up in essentially like, how do we just care for one another as people on this campus and try to support one another in a meaningful way as we interact with each other. That's us. And I am happy to take questions. I'll stop sharing my screen so I can see folks as you have questions. All right. Any questions from the group?
I have a quick question. I've had several, obviously, today.
Yeah, good.
So I also teach with the MAT program, which is online and through Global Campus. So I feel like I've had some confusion about whether we send our students to you or to someone else when we have concerns in those classes. So maybe you could offer clarity.
Yeah, I'm happy. We're happy to take them on. I work with a lot of the MAT program, and so because a lot of that comes down to they're living a little bit different life, right? Like those are working professionals that have come back and are just dealing with a whole bunch of stuff. So if you want to send them to us, you absolutely can. I think we have a close relationship with our global friends, and so if there's like kind of a partnership or through the advising or through Pamela or anything like that, we absolutely will reach out there and make those connections with them.
Okay, so there's not like someone in the global side that we should be touching base with instead of you.
No, you can just shoot them over our way.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Good. Any other questions?
So Andy, I'm going to ask the question we started with a long time ago. So how is it that you can kind of manage the emotional burden of doing this work?
Yeah. Don prepped me. He was going to ask this question after I just kind of shared at the beginning. I think what's really important in the way I try to approach the work, right? And it's not perfect for everybody, but this has been my approach. I try to know in that half hour or hour I'm working with a student, or 10 minutes I'm working with a student, as I hear what's going on for them, was I attentive? Did I share the resources that are available to that student? And did I fully try to advocate where I could advocate for a student? I can't leave that meeting and go live that student's life, right? But if I know I fully resourced, listened, advocated, and given that student the tools to go forward and try to be successful, and success isn't necessarily like it's all fixed, right? Like that usually isn't the case, but at least they have the ability to take that next step, to have that next conversation. I don't take that home with me, right? But if I'm sitting at home and I'm on the couch or I can't sleep and I'm thinking about that student still, then that's my moment where I kind of cycle back through and go, okay, maybe I missed this one, or I didn't get this email sent, or shoot, there's one more resource that I should have given. I will get up and email the student at that moment, right? So that they've got it and have it. And so I think as you're working through these situations, if you can just fully try to give them the tools to be successful, then hopefully you don't take that home. I'm not saying that what you hear isn't hard, right? There's a lot of really messed up stuff that our students are dealing with and that we're all dealing with. But if you're just there and committing to that help piece and have given everything you can, I think that's a way I've found that then I don't take that with me home. Does that answer your question, Don?
It does. And as I said at the beginning, I think that's a very mature and self-caring answer. I think sometimes we do, I know I do this, I ruminate when I can't fix a student situation. And I think hearing you talk helps me put that into better perspective. So I really do appreciate that.
Good.
Other questions for Andy?
I want to say thank you all for coming. I know there's lots of names here. I think some of you have been to this presentation every year. And I think lots of folks that I lean on when I talk about leaning on you all to help our students. There's lots of names on the screen that I know I've emailed and I've asked you to help with our students. So I genuinely appreciate you all taking the time to come today and for the great work and the support that you're giving our students on a daily basis too. Certainly it's not just us, like this is truly a team approach at this campus to help our students and help each other kind of move forward here. So I appreciate you all coming today.
And we do have one more question in the chat. There's a wonderful closing, but we got one more question in the chat.
Okay, there's me.
It's about if a student is sharing something related to stalking, sexual violence, etc., how we can explain to them in a thoughtful way what we're mandated to report and how they can go to care. The questioner indicates that they recognize you talked about this a little bit, but maybe if you go with that process a little bit more slowly and clearly, that'd be excellent.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Megan, for that. I unfortunately just had to do this today with a student appointment. I think when we sit down, if a student says, I need to tell you something that happened this weekend or whenever, that was really bad. The way we approach it is truly trying to come from that care concern place, right? Of, okay, I want to hear and I want to listen, but I want you to have control of the situation from this point forward. So if you tell anything you tell me, I'm mandated to pass it along through certain policies and it gets out of your control. But the care office is here and has professionals that specialize in this work and can talk you through the resources, the policies, how to work with the police if that's something you need to do, or a protection order, and everything you say to them will stay within their shop. And they will talk you through how to move forward from here without it getting out of your control. And I think most students are like, okay, yeah, I've actually never had a student go, oh no, I want to stay with you. Like most of them are like, oh no, I want to go to care. Now, do they come back? They do, but it's usually then after they truly understand like why care and kind of gain back that control a little bit. Does that help, Megan? Okay.
It does. And then someone asked if you still have the neat wheel of support that used to be handed out that helped faculty know where and what to refer to.
Yeah, absolutely. So those wheels of support are actually, there's one for the care office and one through institutional equity. And so institutional equity has got, and if you didn't know this, on the main K-State webpage at the very bottom, there's a Title IX non-discrimination, just quick link that takes you right to equity. So it's a one click off the website. If you went to institutional equity's website, the wheels are there electronically, and they've got them broken down by campuses. And then I think CARE also has hard copies of their wheel. So those are the two owners of that wheel for folks.
Thank you, Andy.
Yeah.
So seeing and hearing no additional questions, I'll remind you, if you ever have questions, that's why the office exists. So please do reach out if you have further concerns or need further guidance. But thank you so much, Andy, for being here and for doing the awesome work you do at our campus and to helping us service our students and follow through on that promise of support, which I think is very important to K-State's climate. So thank you so much, Andy. So please join me in thanking Andy Thompson for his wonderful presentation. Next week, because again, we do this every noon on Wednesday, we'll have Andy Faber, Dr. Andy Faber, talking about backward and ungraded, promoting equity through assessment, which is going to be a fantastic presentation. We saw a little bit of this at the SOTO Showcase last year, and we're very excited to see this next week. We'll have a post-event survey. This is dropped into the chat, so if you complete that, it'd be great. I'll remind you, you have the opportunity to earn professional development certificates, either as a GTA or as a faculty or staff member. You can be a TLC fellow too, so you can check out the link that my colleagues will drop into the chat if you're interested. If anyone has any questions, I'm here. Otherwise, thank you so much for spending some time with us today, and I hope you have a great rest of your week.